Good afternoon. My name is Erwin Chemerinsky. I'm the Dean of the Law School at UC Berkeley, and I feel incredibly fortunate with Howard Gilman to be the co-chair of the advisory board for the National Center on Free Speech and Civic Engagement. I think it's a testament to the influence and power of this entity that Donald Trump decided to release his executive order on free speech on the day of our inaugural conference. So I thought it only appropriate that I use my few minutes at the podium to talk about this executive order. I worried about whether I'd have time to read it, master its detail and nuances, since after all it came out today. It has been so much advertised as a major effort by the federal government. Well, there's only one operative paragraph that deals with free speech. I can read it to you quickly. It says, the heads of covered agencies shall, in coordination with the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, take appropriate steps in a manner consistent with applicable law, including the First Amendment, to ensure institutions that receive federal research or education grants promote free inquiry, including with compliance with all applicable federal laws, regulations, and policies. My initial instinct is to shrug at that. Who's against free inquiry? It doesn't seem to do anything that's not already part of current law. Yet I would suggest to you that this executive order is both unnecessary and undesirable. In terms of it being unnecessary, never before in American history has a president issued an executive order to try to regulate free speech on college campuses. Never before has any federal agency found it necessary to try to control what campuses do with regard to free speech. Nor is it needed today. There is no crisis with regard to free speech on college campuses. To be sure, there are high-profile incidents that occur, troubling. There are certainly very difficult issues to work out with regard to free speech on campus, such as the ones we're talking about today and the ones the center is pursuing and working on. But it's a mistake to describe what's going on campuses as involving any kind of free speech crisis. The reality is, free speech occurs without incident on almost every campus, virtually every day. You only have to walk across the Berkeley campus, literally any day, and see in Sproul Plaza numerous speakers on an incredible array of issues presenting diverse perspectives. I can just talk about what's gone on in my own law school, Berkeley Law, in the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago Tuesday, the Human Rights Center had a speaker about the plight of the Uyghurs, the Muslims in China. A group of students from China at the law school protested against this. The Muslim Student Association protested against what the Chinese students were saying. A week ago today, a center at the law school had a justice from the Israeli Supreme Court speak. The Students for Justice with Palestine protested against it, handing out leaflets and standing in the hall. Day before yesterday, the Federalist Society had a former Congressman, Bob Barr, come speak against gun control. A group of other student organizations asked that this be canceled in light of the New Zealand tragedy. The Federalist Society refused, and the student organizations conducted a protest. They posted things on billboards, bulletin boards throughout the law school. They held what they called a die-in in the hall. All of this was free speech. There was conservative speech. There was liberal speech. But all of it was exactly what an educational institution should be. So I very much disagree with those who would say we're dealing with some kind of crisis of suppression of speech on campus. But the other point is that I think that the Trump executive order is undesirable. I worry greatly about its vagueness. I don't think that any college or university administrator could possibly know what it is that's required or prohibited by this executive order. No college or university administrator could know what kind of conduct might cause them to lose federal funds. I worry about some of the statements that President Trump has made in the past with regard to when he wants to withhold federal funds, or the examples he's picked with regard to free speech. Unfortunately, some of these involved my campus, UC Berkeley. A couple of years ago, there was an incident where Milo Yiannopoulos was to speak on campus. An off-campus group, Tifa, came and was committing acts of violence, vandalism on campus. The then chancellor at UC Berkeley, Nicholas Sturks, felt that he couldn't assure the safety of campus if Yiannopoulos spoke on that evening. It is the duty of every campus to protect the safety of students, staff, and faculty. Chancellor Dirks, I think, acted completely appropriate under those circumstances in saying that Yiannopoulos could not speak on that evening. Nonetheless, 2 days later, President Trump in a tweet said that if Berkeley won't protect free speech, it should lose all federal funds. Is that what President Trump has in mind with regard to this executive order? Well, there's an incident at Berkeley last month where an off-campus speaker was punched by somebody from off-campus. It didn't involve any students, staff, or faculty from the Berkeley campus. Yet this has become the incident that President Trump is pointing to with regard to free speech on campus. Might something like this, where the campus had no responsibility and realistically could not have done anything, be the basis for losing funds? Let me be clear. I think there are hard issues with regard to free speech facing campuses, but I don't think this executive order begins to deal with them. I even worry that this executive order could divert attention from them. Let me just mention a few of these hard issues. One is, how much does a campus have to spend for safety in order to protect free speech? At what point can a campus say, we just can't afford the safety precautions, therefore we can't permit the speech? In the fall of 2017, UC Berkeley spent $3.9 million for security to permit some controversial speakers like Milo Yiannopoulos, who did appear, Ben Shapiro, and others. But what if it wasn't Free Speech Week and $3.9 million? What if it was Free Speech Semester and it was $40 million? Every dollar is coming away from the other educational missions of the campus, from student scholarships, from instruction, from the educational budget. There is no answer in the law right now to the question that I've posed. When I arrived on the Berkeley campus in the summer of 2017, our wonderful Chancellor, Carol Christ, asked me, how much does the campus have to spend for security? And I said, I'm not campus counsel, you have a lawyer, but if I were campus counsel, I would tell you there is no clear answer in the law right now to that. No court has yet addressed it. I said, if I were campus counsel, I'd tell you you need to think about two questions. One is, what's your stomach for being sued? I said, if you exclude a speaker because you don't want to pay the security costs, you will get sued. There's no way to know what a court will do, and if you lose, you'll have to pay attorney's fees. And I said, the second question is, what do you want the message of the campus to be at this moment in time? I think Chancellor Christ wisely said she wanted the message to be that Berkeley is a free speech campus and spent the funds. But the answer remains unresolved. Some campuses are now trying to set a dollar limit as to the amount that they'll spend for security, and then when that money is expended, won't allow controversial speakers. Is that constitutional? I don't think so, but it's an issue that has to be faced. A second issue that has to be faced concerns what's the campus responsibility with regard to online speech. President Napolitano began by talking about what went on at Berkeley in 1965. Our image of free speech on campus was so shaped by the free speech movement, but it was about students wanting to speak on campus. It was what administrators were trying to do to restrict that speech. Now, so often, speech occurs over social media, over the internet, over Facebook, over Twitter, over Yik Yak. The distinction between on-campus and off-campus speech becomes meaningless. There's no doubt that the internet and social media are the most powerful medium for communication since the development of the printing press. It's tremendously democratized the ability to reach a mass audience. It used to be, in order to reach a large number of people, somebody to be rich enough to own a newspaper or to get a broadcast license. Now anyone with a smartphone or access to a modem in a library can reach a mass audience. There's tremendous benefit to that, but there's also potential great harm. This can be used to publicly reveal very private facts to a mass audience. It's often called on campuses doxing. It can also be used for harassment. You had the chance in the last panel to hear from Kelly Music, the student from Mary Washington University. I was the lawyer who argued that case on her behalf in the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit last May. And the reason I took the case was I think it's so important that colleges and universities protect their students from harassment. In answer to President Napolitano's questions, my argument to the Fourth Circuit was there's so much that the campus could have done without ever restricting or punishing speech. Campus officials could have condemned the threatening speech. The campus could have adopted a cyberbullying policy. The campus could have provided protection for, or even counseling for the students, and so on. But how to balance the desire to protect speech with the need to protect students from harassment is an enormously difficult issue. It's what we need to focus on now. And the third question that I focus on that we need to talk about is how do we make campuses an inclusive environment for all students where all feel comfortable being able to speak and participate. What's striking to me in the first panel of the columnists is how much of what they talked about was about peer pressure, student on student pressure, faculty member on faculty member pressure, social pressure about what to say and not to say. It is crucial that we draw a distinction between such social pressures and any attempt by the government to regulate or control speech. There's always social pressure what we should and shouldn't say. We all learn from a young age there's certain things that are inappropriate to say in public. And yet I do worry that especially in our social media, internet age, there's great pressure on people not to say controversial things. How do we as educational institutions deal with that? How do we as educational institutions make sure that it is an inclusive, hospitable learning environment for all students? And this raises many things that we need to talk about and think about. How do we teach our students the value of tolerance and the value of not ostracizing, good emphasis, not ostracizing or criticizing those with whom they disagree? How do we teach our students the value of free speech? One thing that I find troubling is how little understanding there is often among students about the history of suppression of speech and the values of speech. At the same time, how do we teach our students how to respond constructively to the speech that they don't like? What I always try to emphasize to my students is if you don't like a speaker, invite your own speaker. It's absolutely appropriate to have non-violent, non-disruptive responses to speakers you don't like. But I don't think we do a very good job of teaching our students about how to do this. And finally, how do we create educational institutions where especially historically excluded and marginalized groups feel included and welcome? These are the questions that we need to focus on, but the Trump executive order doesn't address any of these, and I worry will divert attention from all of them.